And welcome to another Nothing Like a Good Book. It's a show that we dedicate to authors and we promote authors. We talk about their books, fiction, nonfiction, children's books, whatever. I'd encourage them to do it and, where they hope to go with it. My guest today is Mr. Charles Floyd. He's an author. Of course he is, you idiot. He's a born-again Christian. He's a sinner saved by grace, blessed by being born in and raised in southeastern Tennessee, USA. Hallelujah. He graduated from the University of Tennessee in 1977 with a BS and later received a Master of Business Administration degree from Golden Gate University in 1982. Then he went on to Biblical Studies in 1989, receiving a BA in Biblical Studies from the Northern California Bible College. And finally, if all that wasn't enough, a Juris Doctorate from the British American School of Law back in 2001. And for the last 25 years of his working career, he's spent building church projects, which we'll research, as a construction project management firm throughout California and other states. And I want to thank him for his service because Charles is a Navy veteran and he was in the Cuban blockade, 62. I think I was 8 at the time or something. And the Vietnam War, thank you for your service, 63, 64, and 65. There's a man for you. So without further ado, I would like to welcome this gentleman right here. Charles, hello, how are you?
I am absolutely fantastic.
You got enough thingos up there on the wall, my friend, and the flags. Very nice indeed. All those studies you did and so on. Look, I got to ask you that you're the first, I'm going to say religious for the sake of it, but your 2 books are very unique. We're going to be going into those. But before you were born again, what was your life like?
I was born again in 1952. I was just 9.5 years old and I walked the aisle. However, when I went into the Navy, I took another route. And that took me through 20 years of being away from what my biblical background actually didn't show up. It was just a matter of being under constant conviction. Finally, I was transferred back to a little town in Mansfield, Ohio, where I finally just said, okay, Lord, whatever you want me to do, I'll do. And I joined that church and funny story, my mother decided that when my brother was going to become a pastor, he took a church in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Whereas she called me up one night and says, we've got to all get together and support your brother. I said, Mom, I'm trying to start a $750 million project here in Mansfield. I cannot do that. She said, my boys are going to be there. Well, when Mom speaks, Mom speaks. So I was there.
Right.
Fortunately, I met my wife there 40 years ago. But to answer your question succinctly, quite frankly, I was a sinner, but I was just absolutely fighting it tooth and nail. I was ambitious. I tried to work my way into a success, which was always frustrating as all get out, being in construction at that time and coming out of engineering.
Well, when you say a church project, what do you mean by that? I mean, I understand, in the overview that for 25 odd years you were involved building churches. Is that right?
That is correct. We did 74 church projects in those 25 years.
That's an unusual career. You don't meet too many people that build churches.
No, but I guess in 1992, I was in San Francisco. I was chief estimator for a large construction firm. And they allowed us to have, we needed all of the project managers and all of the people like myself, officers in the corporation, needed to go through the non-discriminatory practices seminar.
Right.
I made it through lunchtime all right. And then the lady that was giving it, she says, now we got to talk about sexual orientation. Now, bear in mind, it's in the middle of San Francisco in the early 90s.
Right.
I said, well, I'll be honest with you. I'm a believer, same as Anita Bryant. I don't, they can never reproduce. They can only recruit. So I just don't want them on the job site.
Uh-huh.
So that really put pressure on the company I was working for. And at that time, they said, well, we're going to have to let you go. Times are tough, and we just don't have the jobs. At that time, I was carrying about $300 million worth of projects.
Wow. A lot of experience there, a lot of pressure too.
So I left,
Mm-hmm.
and they gave me 17 weeks pay severance package.
Right.
I put together a Class A, Class B, and a Class C license in California and started building. And it wasn't long after that till I worked out a strategic alliance with the California Baptist Foundation.
Mm-hmm. And
the rest is history. We did everything from $3,000 jobs to $10 million jobs.
Very good.
So it was a beautiful experience.
It would have been.
Tough. If you've ever tried to build a church, you're dealing with, a lot.
Well, I had a couple of questions in mind I was going to ask you, because let's face it, it's not a residential house. It's not a block of apartments. It's a church. And I've been in enough of them in my travels and God knows what, but the reality is they all seem similar to a degree.
To a degree, that is correct, but they're extremely unique in their requirements by code. Uh-huh. Recognize that when churches get built, they go off the tax rolls. So the city regulators, whoever's responsible to oversee our jobs, mm-hmm. at that point, they are giving me all kinds of static over any little thing that they can give me, because mm-hmm. they do not like what I'm doing.
Why? What's wrong with it?
Well, like I said,
Hitler's, huh?
it's a monetary thing. Notwithstanding, there may have been a certain amount of conviction going on there as well.
Right.
So.
Okay. I just want to touch on the fact that you were a Navy veteran, okay, and you are a Navy veteran. The Cuban blockade, that must have been I don't know, how would you describe that back in 1962? Exciting? Scary?
It was from my point of view, because I was just 19.
Right.
Man, I was 10 foot tall and bulletproof. I was just anybody's dog and hunt with me. And as such, I was ready for anything. But we did. We stormed around the Caribbean there for about 3 or 4 months.
Right.
Making sure that the missiles were leaving and making sure that everything was on the up and up.
Right.
But it was I guess the biggest thing I remember about that whole excursion was going through the Panama Canal.
All right.
We were stationed on the West Coast.
Okay.
And then having to go through the Panama Canal, the uniform of the day was bathing suits. Well, I'm as fair-skinned as they come. So I got burnt really bad.
Oh, dear, oh, dear, oh, dear. But you got through 3 tours of Vietnam, 63, 64, and 65. Independent tours, obviously, back and forth. You weren't there.
Yeah, back and forth. I had 2 8-month deployments where we were hauling Marines and their equipment. The ship I was on was an old cargo ship, no air conditioning, no nothing. It was a miserable piece of work. But we made those trips. 2 of them were 8 months long, and 1 of them was 4 months long.
Right.
And this was just at the buildup. Now this is before the war ever started much. We were there as advisors. We were there as observers. We were there as anything that you could classify as non-combatant.
I get it.
So, but yeah, it was quite a deal. And seeing all those Marines go over there and all of that equipment, the ship I was on had what they call LCMs, which is machinery hauling boats, as well as the LCVPs, which were for personnel.
Mm-hmm.
So consequently,
a lot of equipment went. My word, it did. This is your book, The Comparative Analysis of the Bible with the Koran. We're going to bring that up right now. This is the one here.
That's it.
That's a beautiful shot. Very nice. Right. You, it's when you retired, you actually embarked on writing the book, A Comparative Analysis of the Bible with the Koran, right?
That is correct. It was during COVID that I actually wrote it. It had been stewing in my brain since 2001. When George
All
Bush...
right. The obvious question is, what would make you write a book like this?
I could not understand the thought process of people having such passion, such misplaced passion as to kill innocent people. There's 3,000 people roughly that got killed in the Twin Towers, notwithstanding the first responders. So when that happened, then I had to do some soul searching. One of the reasons in '89 when I went back and got a biblical studies degree was that I needed to know what I understood. I needed to know what I believed. And I think these people need to know what they believe.
All right. The motivation then was you being very uncomfortable with not being able to understand why these, bloody ragheads, as we called them in Vietnam, but, they're not all jihads. This is the hardest part about it. There's so much damage done in the name of the Quran and in the name of Muslim when there are so many peace-loving, good Muslim people, and it's just not fair to their culture or to their race. So you're stirring about it and you start researching. And what are the big things you come up with then? What's in the Bible that isn't right or is right that, prefaces the Quran, which, what a hard book to write.
It really was. And trying to place this thing out in a way that it's not offensive. I don't want to be offensive to anybody. But I want people to be critical thinkers. I want people to be able to read this and understand a few things. And the first thing we need to understand is that Muhammad was, even though being illiterate, never
I meant
wrote
the Middle East too, by the way, not Vietnam, before the Middle East, of course. Now go on.
But Muhammad was an illiterate, and as such, he didn't write the Koran. The Koran was only put in paper form in the 1900s, over 1,200 years after he was dead. But he had some very shallow understanding of parts of the Old Testament and a little bit about the gospel. And when he wrote, or when he went through his sermons, he would, and these things were as written down from oral remembrances. Mm-hmm. When they wrote it down, it was placed in a focus of the works doctrine. Whereas if you know anything about the Bible, and I guess you got to start first from the standpoint of being a born-again Christian, quite frankly, the Bible is my benchmark. It is where I start from as truth. Now, they would say the Koran is. Mm-hmm. But if that's the case, why is there a disparity? And if George Bush was right, that Allah is the same as God, why is there a disparity between the covers of the books? I'll give you an example.
Good idea.
Gideon, who was one of the judges in the book of Judges, pulled 10,000 men together to go after the Midianites. any Bible scholar will tell you the Midianites were a few generations removed from Abraham and Keturah. That was just their, that was one of their sons.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they had an ongoing war against the Israelites as they were settling back in the Promised Land after the Exodus. As you get into it, the way the Koran portrays that particular story, it talks about Saul being up against the Philistines and Goliath. Well, not only are the participants wrong in the story, because what God had told him, he says, take these 10,000 men you've got down to the river. Those who lap like a dog, take them with you, and only 300 of them went, and I will hand Midian over to you. Whereas when this same story is told as Saul, who was the first king of Israel, was supposedly fighting the Philistines. Well, the problem not only is the participants, but there's an 80-year difference there.
Mm-hmm.
There's 80 years between the book when the Judges were written and when the first king of Saul was appointed. So this is that's just one example of many.
So do you have, let me ask you this, through this book, right? This is your latest book. We're going to show another one in a minute. In fact, I might even show it right now. It's this one.
Yeah.
That was your first book, wasn't it?
No, the Koran book was the first.
Okay. This was the second.
This is the second.
From Acts to Action. You want to talk about that one as well?
That is basically it's kind of like a commentary, but it has a little bit more application to churches and individuals of today.
Okay. All right, then. So we'll go back to this one. I'm trying to understand, the comparisons. In the book itself, do you give many comparisons?
The first half of the book is the disparity section. The next section is the works doctrine. And it's so ingrained in the Koran that I only got through, there's 114 surahs in the Koran. I only got through 39 of them until I finally said, this is so repetitious. Here's a list of the rest of them. Look them up yourself. Then the third section is the jihad section. And this is where I kind of take offense or back to you on the fact that Islam is a peaceful religion. It's really not, because the history,
I must admit, the history doesn't say that, does it?
No, it doesn't. The bottom line on the jihad passages, if you get martyred, then you have a special dispensation to go to heaven.
I think it's 42 virgins, isn't it?
72.
Wow.
72. I can't keep up with my wife, much less 72.
Yeah, but you're not married to them, see? Love and leave, as they say. Here's the deal. They believe that. That's their belief.
They do. They really do. Now, the fourth part of the book is basically discriminatory passages, especially against women. According to
you've only got to look at what's going on in overseas right now. That pisses me off. We lose good boys and girls in these wars. We leave. They got our equipment now. They got everything. They got our. It doesn't matter. But the point is, everything's gone back to where it was and worse. And the women, the women of Afghanistan are just hopeless at the moment. It's
it is.
It's disgusting. But anyway,
Mark, can you imagine a self-respecting woman of America relinquishing all the freedom she has here?
No.
To go into that kind of lifestyle, not being a person, but being a chattel property.
Mm-hmm.
You are owned by that man.
Oh yeah, never mind the covering up and all that jazz. But I'm thinking of no schooling and no teaching, no education, no learning, and it all comes down because they're I don't know, I guess they're scared shitless that the women are going to learn too much and take over, or, not be obedient to what they want, or just don't know how to handle that. Would that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense, especially from the standpoint that the population of women outnumbers the men. The men are out there fighting and dying, and they're sitting home and doing whatever it is they're doing. But
cranked up like mice in a corner. They should get their own army going, like they do in Israel, and get out there and knock them all off and be done with it. So what pertinent information did you find missing or excluded without explanation, which the Bible, though, expounds on?
I think the whole idea of the New Testament, the new covenant of grace, throughout the Old Testament, God appears to be somewhat judgmental. There are many places where, there's 300 plus messianic prophecies through the Old Testament. Mm-hmm. But when you get to the New Testament, that's when Christ comes along and he says, there is no woman, there is no man, there is no Jew, there is no Gentile, there is no slave, there is no master. And Paul said the same thing. The other thing that is monumentally missing out of this without any kind of explanation is the Apostle Paul. Paul wrote very close to a third of the New Testament. And most of his writings have to do with the application of the Gospels itself.
Right.
How do you take these things that Christ said and how do you apply them to your life?
Mm-hmm. Charles, how did you prepare to study something like this? I mean, how did you get going to set this thing in motion? I mean, it's not your normal book, is it?
No, it's not. It is not. I read, 18 or 20 books of Islamic authors to find out, what is it they believe? How do they believe it? How do they apply it? And then I got into the Koran. I read the Koran twice. Then I started breaking it down. I got to a point by 2006, I had the confidence to actually teach a course in Islamic studies. So
all based on that you'd gone through the Quran.
All based on, I said, I will not go into the hadiths because the hadiths are like the Torah to the Bible, or like a lot of our commentaries to the New Testament. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They are man's explanation of what God has said. God said it. He when he says it, he means it.
What makes, just out of left field, what makes a born-again Christian?
That is a tough question.
I believe so. That's why I asked it, because I think in a lot of ways it's a lot of crap. There are people that utilize the branding and the name, and they shouldn't be, and it's not fair to the others. I mean, if you come back to believing God, if you come back to believing in the one force, the source, and everything you do is kind to others and everything else, to me, that is being born again, that you lost your faith, however you were brought up, and you've come back. Or is it deeper than that?
I think it's deeper than that. There's a stage of conviction by the Holy Spirit. When we get saved, the Holy Spirit comes upon us. We believe that. I believe he lives within my heart, within my soul. He guides me. When I wake up at night sometimes and think about things, I would never have believed I'd ever become an author. Quite frankly, that was never, I was an engineer by background. I went into construction. I'm as a cob. But when it comes to something like this, I had to be stirred in the spirit.
There you go. Okay, I'll buy that. It's very good, because I must admit, engineers can be very difficult from a point of view of interviewing and also selling to or whatever. They're very analytical, very quiet. So good on you for doing this. There's a lot of study, a lot of work went into this thing. But before we run out of time, I also very much want to discuss this book here.
Oh, the Acts book.
Okay, from Acts to Action. I mean, that's the book of Acts. All right, let's talk about that one. Give me an overview. What is the book From Acts to Action?
There are 14 places in the book of Acts where it has a little phrase in there that said, and the church grew handily, or the church added daily to their congregation. Those kind of things began to trigger in my mind. I said, this is a transition phrase. What has happened to cause that? And it comes about from 7 internal to the church's influences and 7 external influences.
All right.
When God wanted the church to grow, he put persecution. He allowed persecution to happen.
See, some would say, I don't understand that.
Okay, well, it's a simple matter. I mean, if in the first century it was such a wondrous time to be a Christian and to be a believer in Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. Everybody had a working knowledge of him.
Right. Right.
And they wanted to stay there and just take in all of this spiritual energy that was happening at that time. Well, God,
at that time, yeah. Later on, they threw you to the lions, right?
Oh yeah.
Unbelievable what people do to each other.
It is, and then so God said, "Okay, I'm going to turn loose some persecution." So He did. He allowed them to be persecuted, and He flushed them like a covey of quail. I mean, they went all over the countryside preaching and talking about this Jesus that they had met.
Right. Now, the book before, Charles, and this one that we're looking at now, what genre would you call these? What do they come under?
I hesitate to call them religious books. I hesitate to call them self-help.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. It's a challenging one. History, maybe. Religious history, perhaps.
That's a good genre, and as well as an application effect.
Right.
We have a capability of applying these truths. We need to understand, and this particularly this first book, I wanted people to understand that they needed to do some critical thinking. Quit listening to these floating head pundits on cable news and think for yourself.
Well, I think people are doing that a little more and more now. But even so, now they've got to think about, well, hang on, we're all brought up with man-made religions, which has caused wars since day one, right through history, God knows what else. There's all these different denominations. We're all connected, all this and that. And now we're opening the doors to see who maybe actually made us. Are they called aliens? Are they going to visit soon? Do we come from somewhere else? I mean, at the end of the day, to me, there's still a God. There's got to be one God, if you like, a force. We are all under his banner. We are all his children.
I think you're on to it there. I just go a step further, that whole idea of salvation. Jesus said it in his gospel. He says, you will not come to the Father except through me.
All right.
There is no coming to the Father except through me. He said that multiple times through his 3.5-year ministry. He says, what the Father thinks, I think. What the Father does, I'm in the process of doing. The things he has placed upon me will happen. So I just, I look at it from that standpoint and say, hey, I want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of that.
I want to be a part of that. That's for me. And how can I do that? Well, on the bottom here is Charles Floyd's address. If you'd like to purchase either book directly, this one, From Acts to Action, and his latest book, okay, which is this one, a comparative analysis of the Bible with the Koran, or Koran, whichever way you want to pronounce it. But, interesting. It would probably be heavy, but I think it would be very, very interesting. Get some knowledge, get some learning on it. But
Do something.
But there are people who just want to kill us. That's all there is to it. That's all they know. They train from kids, 2, 3, 4 years of age, programmed to kill us because it's in the Koran. And that's wrong.
I never found that in the Koran as much as I found that in studying some of the later hadiths.
Okay.
I realize there's about 1,300 years difference. Bear in mind that Paul lived in the 1st century.
So really, the writings have been changed around, haven't they? Throughout
Bible.
history, right? Throughout history.
Not so much to the Bible. Once it was canonized, and that was the deliberate interpretation of what God's word actually says.
I'm not talking about the Bible. I'm talking about the Quran.
Talking about the Quran. Yeah. No,
I've read that in a few places that some people put in there who shouldn't have been had the access to be able to add to the Quran. You know.
Yeah, that's in there.
Yeah, it's in there. People are going to read this stuff. If they want to go into it, you've got to study it yourself. You've got to, from our end of it all, all I know is what are we doing over there? What are we fighting? Because if we don't, this happens. And we're the world's police, we have to be. Because if Americans doesn't stand up, who does? Who will?
Amen.
And it's just so sad. I lost a lot of buddies in wars, and it's sad. But they've gone home. They've gone home to the Lord, and they'll be back another way. Charles, I wish you all the luck in the world. This has been a most unusual interview for me. You're the first of the genre. I hope I don't get too many more. They're too hard. Because I'd have to read this thing for 6 months before I interviewed you, really. But I just don't get time to read all the books that come in. So, but I think it's
you've done
a credit to your age and your work and what you've been through. And from 19, you've seen wars and so on. And look at you now, all that life experience and the studies and the biblical studies and what you found out, what you haven't. I think it's worthwhile, saying, hey, if I am genuinely interested, I should go and have a look at this book. Where can it be bought other than your, direct site?
CharlesRFloyd.com.
What about in Barnes & Noble or?
Barnes & Noble, Amazon.
Okay. Amazon, right.
Several other places.
Okay, good stuff. Well, Charles, it's been an absolute, very interesting and informative interview with you. I wish you well with this. This is your one last question. I don't have any links for you in social media stuff. Do you have any of that, or is there any way people's better off just going to this site, right?
I personally am not much on that.
No. Okay. Yeah. Well, you don't have to.
My publisher has got us on Facebook. He's got us on
good. Okay.
Twitter. He's got us on some other platforms, but I'm really not that active in it. Don't care.
No, but your publisher's done a good job in getting them there. That's the case. But I wasn't given the links. I'm sorry. I would have put them up. And I would have put them up. They're going to be up on the Mark Bishop Media site. And all your bio and your headshot and all your links go up on there for people to be able to find you and talk to you, email you if they want to. So not a problem. I wish you well with this. Good luck. Okay. Thank you very much. It was a lovely speaking with you, Charles.
It's our pleasure, Mark. Thanks so much. You've been a wonderful interviewer.
Thank you.
I appreciate your interest.
You're most welcome. Thank you. Wow. What an interesting fellow. Nothing like a good book, huh? Discovering your book that you wrote. Does it have to be a novel, Mark? No. Look, a paperback, an audio book, an ebook, a little bit of substance, okay? But if it's something you've always wanted to write, let's discover what you're about and let's promote your book for you. And it will help to selling your book. That's a joke. Clean them out of the garage, she says, the Minister for War and Finance. Who's that? That's the missus. The cheese and kisses. Site, I don't know where my fellow's gone. I think he's gone on walkabout, but it'll be up soon, nothinglikeagoodbook.com. All artists are going to be on that. All authors are going to be on it. And there's going to be all sorts of yummy stuff, prizes to win as well. All right. So thank you again for joining us for another episode. Please subscribe, if you would, on the channel. Ring the bell, ding dong, whatever you got to do. The more that come on, the better, because we'd love to take this somewhere and help millions